The golf shaft market today, specifically in the wood category, is an absolute blender to navigate. With so many variables ultimately at play, you never truly know which golf shaft is going to work for you until you have a chance to try it yourself. After the absolutely incredible year that Fujikura has had on the PGA Tour and tours around the world, it's finally time for me to dive in and see what all the hype's about. Let's go. Welcome to Cloudy Coast Golf Co. My name's Johnny, and today we're looking at the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Fujikura Golf and their VeloCore Plus shafts. As someone who enjoys learning about golf equipment and doing my own fair share of dabbling, I think a lot of us ultimately miss out on opportunities to play with certain types of equipment because it doesn't really fit into our player profile. I've been in plenty of situations and fittings over the years where the shaft that should have worked for me ultimately didn't. Because the reality is you never truly know what shaft or what club is ultimately going to work for you until you have an opportunity to hit them. And that's really what today is all about. Today I've got the VeloCore Plus in the blue, black, and red 6X shafts, and I'm going to be putting that to the test to see which of these shafts ultimately will fit my golf game the best and see if they have the potential to maybe kick out my current gamer that I've had in the bag for the last 5 years. And so in order to test these shafts amongst one another, the game plan for today is to accumulate 5 shots through 2 different sets for each of the individual shafts. The first set is just going to be at neutral standard and 9 degree for each of the clubs, which is a 6X shaft for the blue, red, and the black. And then in the second set, I will make any slight adjustments that might need to be made based on the data that I got from the first set to see if I can improve the performance ultimately for that individual shaft and then move forward from there. The specs for each of these golf clubs are 45.5 inches in length, and they're right around a D3 plus or minus about 0.1 or 0.2 swing weight for each of the golf shafts. So that being said, we're gonna get started with the Ventus VeloCore Plus blue, and then we'll move into the red profile and then the black. Here we go. All right, so quick debrief coming off the Ventus Blue shaft. Started out, took me 6 shots, so pretty happy with that. Swing felt good overall. I will say the last shot was the only one that actually felt really good in terms of feeling like contact with the club face itself, and ended up spinning up to 2,800 RPM, which was the highest of the set, and had some of the worst numbers compared to the other 5 as a whole. So overall, interesting to see how it performed. The feedback and the feeling I was ultimately getting from the shaft in terms of the need to almost time it and kind of change the tempo of my swing was necessary pretty early on. So heading over to the Ventus Red, here we go. Honestly, definitely a different feel just in the hands straight away compared to the blue. All right, just got done with the set for the red. I would say in general, it felt better. I felt like I had a little bit more control and understanding as to where the shaft was in comparison to the blue. I think that's kind of indicative just based on the impact locations. I felt like I was a lot more in the center across the board. Was a little bit different in the sense of transitioning from just the two profiles back to back there. I think the spin ended up being a little bit higher in comparison to the blue, but I think that's something I could maybe mess with and change in the loft sleeve on the second set here. But moving on to the black shaft. Yeah, definitely, I'd say more forgiving than the original Ventus black. I tried hitting that before and it was just something I just never could get on board with. There's absolutely a little bit more play to it, and you can definitely feel a little bit more firm profile overall just in comparison to the red there. So here we go. All right, just finished up with the first round of all three shafts and the Ventus black on this most recent one. And honestly, what was crazy for me, the left miss tends to be my more prominent miss. And I was having a pretty difficult time getting that golf ball left of the center line in any capacity. So it was almost tough for me to fully trust the ability to close down that face and like let my hands truly release. And I think that was really indicative of the only shot I got left of the aim line there, which came out, shot number 2, came out at 13.7 degrees of launch, 2,200 spin, and ended up over 300 yards of carry. So that is the ideal shot. And just the fact that I couldn't actually miss the ball left that entire set was pretty wild. So with the first round in the books, let's talk about some big picture items and answer the one burning question going into this video prior to getting into the next set. The first, looking at the looks of these golf shafts. Overall, I think they look amazing. I love the matte finish and the slight texture to each of the individual colors. I think they definitely did themselves a favor by making the blue a little bit more blue compared to previous models that they've put out. And overall, I think it gives you that premium feel no matter which color you're ultimately going with. Now let's answer the burning question. Did the high go high, did the low go low, and did the mid go mid? Starting this test out at neutral standard in my Callaway Elite 9-degree head, all three of these golf shafts were relatively similar from the perspective of delivery and dynamic loft across the board. With only slight differences on launch, the face angle for the red and black shafts was likely the differentiator on spin, bringing the blue in at the lowest among the first set. So simply put, it wasn't quite as easy as identifying these three shafts as a low, mid, and high profile alone. Each of them had a different tendency, and ultimately at the end of the day, it was the overall feel for each of these golf clubs that was really differentiating them and how I was able to swing the club and then where the ball was ultimately going just in this first set. So going into this next set, I'm gonna be making those slight adjustments and we're gonna be digging through the numbers to see how much of a difference those slight tweaks in the club head setup is ultimately gonna affect the performance of these golf shafts. And then we're gonna dive into that a little bit later in the video. Here's part 2. Ventus black. You got neutral, -1 on the loft. The draw setting, honestly, when I set it down, I hated the look of it, and I hit a couple of it and it really was not working out. So I just went back to neutral -1 and definitely kind of brought it in a little bit. Was only able to get 2 left of the start line, and the one that I ended up hitting a hook, I told myself I was just gonna try to hit a hook and see how it ended up. So yeah, interested to see how those numbers really shake out. Definitely some consistency across the board with that, but gonna dive into the blue here and get it set up for set 2. Yeah, so with those last 2, I can feel that tempo and transition. I'm just losing the shaft, and I'm never really getting it to catch up. Last blue set was pretty tough, honestly, and I just felt like I was chasing my tail for the most part. I'm also shortly running out of time, so out of self-preservation, I'm gonna try to get through this set as quickly as possible and hopefully live to make a video another day. Change it up, we got draw setting -1. See if I can help with that face being a slightly open path. And with that, we're probably gonna call it a day here. Set 2 really highlighted the differences between these golf shafts, and I think at the end of the day, the order in which I hit the shafts really made a difference in how they performed in comparison to the first set. Going from blue, red to black in the first set, and then black, blue to red in the second set, really exposed blue during the second set. But overall, I did see improvements in the VeloCore Plus black and red shafts in the second set in comparison to the first. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit more detail and really look at the differences in between each of these individual profiles, hopefully help you at home figure out what could maybe work well for you. And then at the end of the day, I'm gonna be trying to pick the right one for me to progress through the rest of this driver shaft and 3-wood shaft testing journey that I'm gonna be going on. So first up, let's talk about the VeloCore Plus Blue, which historically has been the first shaft that they release in their lineup due to the broad applications from a fitting perspective that they ultimately have. The new VeloCore Blue TR Plus just came out, and again, it's the blue profile first prior to getting the red and black profiles out in that individual line. And during the first set, it really performed quite well, with all 6 of the shots being straight and in play with only some slight deviations on the overall ball flight. But from a feedback perspective, at the end of the day, I hated every single part of it. From a understanding on where I was ultimately hitting the ball on the club face to knowing where the club was at a given point in time in the swing. Pretty much once I started that transition in the downswing, I lost everything, and I was kind of just making it up as I was going along from swing to swing. And we definitely saw that in part 2 of this test. With my awesome palm tree design, which was not intentional by any means. I was basically making a change from swing to swing in an effort to try to figure out what this club ultimately needed to do the best it possibly could. And really, I was surprised when looking at some of the club data to see I was still striking it in the center of the club face for the most part, but where that club face was ultimately pointing and how I was delivering that club to the ball was nowhere where it needed to be. And that lack of consistency that was there is just something that I can't really work with for the direction I'm trying to go with my game. And really just highlights how important it is to listen to your gut when you do get a club. If it doesn't feel right, there's definitely some better options out there. And getting into the next two shafts, which we tested today, there are some massive differences in the consistency and the overall performance that we were able to see out of each of these shafts. The next in line to talk about here is going to be the VeloCore Red. And being the high launch shaft that it's advertised as, it honestly was everything but. If I had to describe the feel that I was getting for this particular golf shaft, I would have to say it would be somewhere between ease and less effort. Both sets performed quite well, and the consistency here was pretty great. I started set 2 at a neutral -1 setting on the driver, and the first 3 shots resulting in a landing area that was probably the size of a kiddie pool, which is certainly not on brand for my game off the tee. Changing that again to a draw setting at -1, it turned this shaft into an absolute monster. The neutral path with a more square club face, and I'm not sure whether it was the look at address or just how it felt, but swing after swing, at the end of the day, I felt like I could go harder and harder. Ultimately, this resulted in 173 miles an hour of ball speed by the end of the set, and that's at 55 degrees in my garage, which I was pretty surprised with at the end of the day. The final set in that draw -1 setting ultimately resulted in a draw-only profile, which stayed relatively straight and pretty consistent throughout all the shots that I was counting. But the red shaft as a whole most certainly did not live up to that high profile that it's advertised as, and especially when we're going to be comparing that coming up next here to the Ventus Black, we've got two totally different monsters on our hands, and it's really at the end of the day going to give me some things that I'm going to have to work through in order to figure out which one of these is going to be best for me going forward. Similar to the red in terms of how I felt it fit my swing, the black, especially in the second set, pretty much felt automatic off the tee. Just looking at all the shots from set 1 and all the shots in set 2, with the exception of my intentional hook, it virtually eliminated the left side of the golf course. The consistency that I was able to see specifically in set 2 is one of those things from a distance and directional orientation standpoint would really give me a lot more options out on the golf course in terms of club selection off the tee in comparison to how I've been playing really over the last couple years. The problem is though, when we start to dig into the information and look at the data between the red and the black shaft in the second set, it really makes it quite difficult to decide between the two, and maybe down the road could lead to having two separate driver shaft setups in the bag to give me a draw bias or a fade bias, ultimately depending on the kind of course that I was playing. But after buying these 3 golf shafts over a Black Friday sale from Shaftopia.com and wanting to take advantage of their 30-day exchange policy, I'm electing to go with the VeloCore Plus Black, and I'm going to be exchanging the red and the blue shafts for a 7X and a 8X shaft in that Plus Black in order to see how that's ultimately going to perform in subsequent tests where I'm going to be able to compare the 6X, 7X, and 8X from a weight profile standpoint. And then ultimately I have the intention of using the 7X and the 8X, assuming everything's going to end up working out in that order in my mini driver and then ultimately in the 3-wood as I work through this shaft testing journey in the top of the bag to try to get myself set up to ultimately perform a little bit better going into this next season. If you haven't heard of Shaftopia.com and doing something like this would interest you to be able to compare these kinds of shafts side by side and doing your own testing at home, they are one of the many great online stores out there, and they are one of the very few that will allow you to actually change out a shaft after having a period of time to play with them out on the course. So if you're interested in giving one of these shafts a shot, you can do so by following the links in the description down below, and by doing so, you'll help support this channel at the same time. If you made it this far in the video, as always, thank you for tuning in. Questions, comments, critiques, let me hear it down in the comments, and be sure to follow along in the subsequent videos that I have coming up in this series as I test the different shafts in this weight class to see ultimately which one is going to be best suited for me and really the type of performance differences that we're going to see out of those different weight classes for myself and then hopefully for you at home. I'll see you again next time.